My name is Carl Levan. I'm a professor at American University, and I'm a member of the Nigeria Working Group. I'm a longtime friend of Nigeria, and I'm pleased to introduce you to a number of organizations and individuals representing those organizations who were a part of a very important sign-on letter that speaks to both the Nigerian government and the government of the United States, reflecting upon the recently hosted Democracy Summit hosted by President Joe Biden, and pleading with both governments to renew and recommit to democracy. But we're issuing this statement. I think I speak for myself here when I say that we've reached a moment in democracy and in the crisis of democracy globally where it's truly a global concern. And when I was learning about politics as a young man, there was a slogan in the peace movement, which was, if the people lead, the leaders will follow. And we have truly reached a moment where the input of civil society and the input of people who defend and believe in democracy are going to be needed at every step of the process. And what I'm so excited about with regard to this letter is that it is a truly multinational effort. It is truly a global commitment to the broad universal aspirations for dignity, for representation, for participation, for political voice, and for respect. And so we are urging both governments and for all defenders of democracy in Africa and the United States to stand for democracy. And I'm really excited to be introducing today's speakers who will help discuss the origins of the letter and also outline some of the policy recommendations for each government involved. I want to make one brief request, which is if you are a member of the media, we would appreciate it if you would take this moment to rename yourself on Zoom so that we know your institutional affiliation. Also, if you have some trouble with connectivity and bandwidth, then please feel free to turn off the camera. And if you have not had a chance to review the letter or to read the letter yet, one of my colleagues will drop it into the chat momentarily. So again, thank you so much for joining us. In terms of the procedure, I'm about to introduce Charles Quellum with the Mennonite Central Committee, who's going to tell you a little bit about the Nigeria Working Group, a group of scholars and activists and non-governmental organizations based in Washington, D.C. Then we'll hear from a few Nigeria-based signatories to the letter, including David Ugalore from the African Network for Economic and Environmental Justice, Austin Aigbe, who's standing in for Idayat Hassan from the Center for Democracy and Development in Abuja. And then we'll hear from a few US-based signatories to the letter, including Ike Izoma, from the RFK Center for Human Rights, Nadine Johnson from PEN America, and we'll have a question and answer session, which is going to be moderated by NECA Achabu. And we're very pleased to have NECA joining us as part of this enterprise. So let me begin by turning it over to Charles Quellum.
Thanks, Carl. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Quellum. I am the Senior Legislative Associate for International Affairs with Mennonite Central Committee, and then a co-chair with Temi Ibiroba and the convener of the working group, Nathan Hostler. Just to say that down the memory lane, I know that this working group was actually birthed at the first year anniversary of the kidnapping of the Chibok girls. And that is just so significant because it kind of expresses our passion for a space that is healthy. And when I say a space, I refer to the democratic space, which is Nigeria. Irrespective of what you think about democracy, it's actually a work in progress. So the fact still remains that it is actually a working group that comprises civil society organizations here in DC, alongside scholars and members of the think tanks and anyone who has a high stake in the Nigerian society. And what we do is to influence the US public policy in a way that it enables a healthy democratic space and process for the Nigerian society. And that is the reason why we have actually been involved in so many congressional briefings through which we reach out to congressional members and staffers to share with them information and then insights as regards to the issues that we are very passionate about. Human rights, governance issues, peace building, and humanitarian assistance or programming. And so I would say that we see the Democracy Summit being hosted by the US government as an entry point for the Nigerian working group to actually collaborate with the CSOs in Nigeria. And actually it is one of our goals and our leverages that with the network of partners that we all have in Nigeria with our own individual organizations, that we are able to pull the content of local knowledge and expertise into our own context here in DC to be able to mobilize and then influence US public policies in a way that there's going to be transparent and accountable governance in Nigeria, and then at the same time, equitable followership for Nigerians. And we know that now, at the moment, I think on the top of the list is the issue of the electoral reform bill, which has been transmitted to President Muhammadu Buhari, and yet at the moment he has not even signed on to it. He has not given consent. So this is one of the issues. But however, we are excited to co-host this event and to say welcome and please, we crave your indulgence to share with us your insight as regards to the letter and statement which we have actually signed onto. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, for that introduction. And I have been honored to be a part of the Nigeria Working Group. I've learned a great deal from you, and it's really wonderful to see such a global commitment to democracy, human rights, and dignity. And we learn a lot from each other. Next, we're going to hear from David Ugalore, my good friend from the Africa Network for Economic and Environmental Justice, and an important voice in Nigeria's Niger Delta. David, are you on the call? Okay, well, we're waiting for David Ugalore.
Carl, I just admitted him, so I believe David will be joining or is joined.
Okay, David will be joining momentarily. I just want to also add, while we're waiting for David Ugalore to join the room, that the letter continues to be open for signatures, and we really hope that this will be an ongoing process that can maintain a critical dialogue for human rights, electoral participation, and accountability in Nigeria. David, you are joining us just in time. This is David Ugalore from the Africa Network for Economic and Environmental Justice. Please go ahead. David, can you unmute yourself?
Hello.
David, go ahead and please tell us a little bit about why ANEEJ thought this letter was a great idea.
So what?
Please go ahead, David.
Can you come again? Can you come again, please?
David, it's your turn to speak. And can you speak for a few minutes about why this letter was so important to the work of the African Network for Economic and Environmental Justice, and where you hope what it will do to set the agenda for the next Democracy Summit?
Hello. Hello.
David, it's your turn to speak. Please go ahead.
Hello.
David, it's your turn
Hello?
to speak. Please go ahead.
Hello. Hello. Yes. First, I want to thank you, Carl, and other colleagues. I'm actually speaking from Egypt, and the network is a bit there. We actually signed on to the letter for obvious reason because of the level of corruptions and the impact on democracy. And we thought this summit organized by the US was a huge opportunity to again engage the US government and other promoters of democracy around the world to understand that corruption is an important issue. And we are very happy that fighting corruption was one of the pillars that the summit was focusing on. And for ANEG, this is an issue we've been working for the past 20 years, and we thought is an important to bring to the attention of the US government, and also to raise the concerns around the impact of corruption on democracy, particularly with regard to resources that is supposed to be strengthening governance system in Nigeria being stolen. It undermines democratic values in the country. And we thought that it's very important for this summit to take note of the reason why there must be reason to continue to strengthen key institutions in the country, and particularly governance institutions that are currently very weak. In areas of asset recovery, it's very important that the Nigerian government put in place a framework that will gain confidence both with countries who are supporting Nigeria to ensure that resources stolen from the countries are returned back to the country. And at the same time, to strengthen electoral systems in the country, you need resources. And unfortunately, with the pandemic having huge impact on the country budget is becoming very difficult for us to deal with the issues. And if the anti-corruption institutions are not strengthened, it will be difficult to guarantee sustainable development in Nigeria. And that is the reason why African Network for Environment and Economic Justice joined with other NGOs within Nigeria and in the US to sign on to this statement to raise the issues of corruptions and how we think it can be addressed to ensure that the values of democracy prevails in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for your commitment to democracy and to your commitment to anti-corruption work. And so if there are questions from participants about the Global Forum on Asset Recovery and the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and some of the specifics around those issues, I want to encourage you to direct them towards David Ugalore during the Q&A. And again, the Q&A will be moderated by NECA Achabu from AFRIPAC. Next, I want to turn to Austin Aigbe, who's from the Center for Democracy and Development in Abuja. And CDD has been an incredibly important part of my education with Nigeria ever since 1999. And we're very pleased to have CDD on the letter and participating in the call today.
Thank you so much, Carl, and great to have met everyone. We were behind on the online having this conversation. So the Center for
I believe Austin is having some
democracy and development, as you already mentioned, and development. We believe that democracy. Oh, can you hear me?
Your bandwidth is a bit low. Austin, I'm going to suggest that you turn off the camera and proceed.
Okay, I think it's better, right?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. So the Center for Democracy and Development, as you already mentioned, is in the forefront of promoting democratic norms and values, which started since 1997, and CDD has been in the front line of agitation for good governance. This letter, and particularly the statement, two critical important points. One is for the Nigerian government to avoid the authoritarian regime that is becoming a norm in the affairs, and two, values. And like Henry just 2 days ago, we also released a statement calling on President Mohamed to immediately sign the electoral amendment bill. We believe that this bill, when signed into law, will improve on our electoral architecture, will improve on the landscape, the Nigerian landscape, will reduce the floodgate of electoral cases, malpractices that is almost a norm in our electoral regime. And we also call on President Buhari to respect rights of people and immediately, as soon as possible, implement the recommendation from the NSAS protest report that came from Lagos and across the states of the Federation. We think these are very fundamental in driving the affairs. We think that the Summit of Democracy is one of the greatest opening for us to bring this to fore, and that the whole world should know that Nigeria is at the verge of democratic collapse if we don't strengthen some of those democratic norms and values. Thank you so much.
Austin, thank you so much. And if there's anything you want to drop into the chat, please do. You did drop out of the call for a few seconds there. In a moment, we're going to hear from Samson Otodo from NECA Africa, who everybody knows as an organization that's on the front lines of electoral reform with the Not Too Young to Run campaign and with their essential participation in a parallel vote count in 2019. Before I turn to Samson as he's getting himself set up, I want to announce that I just received a message from Rafsanjani Musa, and the Transition Monitoring Group has also signed on to the letter, which is very exciting. The Transition Monitoring Group has been a critical part of the front lines of democracy in Nigeria ever since the transition. Samson, please go ahead if you can hear me and talk for a few minutes about why NECA thought this letter was so important. Samson, can you hear me? Okay, I'll wait for Samson to rejoin. In the meantime, let's go ahead to the US-based signatories and we can come back to Samson Etodo from NECA. Ike Izoma from the RFK Center for Human Rights, who had a very important and steady hand in drafting the letter. Ike?
Thank you so much, Carl, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak at this press conference on behalf of the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. And I'd like to start by acknowledging and celebrating the human rights defenders, activists, and citizens in Nigeria and from Nigeria who continue to fight for a democratic Nigeria and in the true sense of the word. You all have our respect and solidarity. We at RFK Human Rights signed on to the letter because of our work on human rights and our strong partnership with Nigerian civil society organizations. We were involved in challenging the arbitrary detention of human rights defenders, including Omoyole Sowore, before the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, and are presently involved as amicus curiae in the Serap case challenging the Twitter ban before the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice. One of my favorite quotes of Robert F. Kennedy is that the sharpest criticism often goes hand in hand with the deepest idealism and love for country. And we believe strongly that the engagement of human rights defenders, of government critics, if you want to call them that, of civil society is essential to the actual practice of democracy, including in Nigeria. For us, democracy is the system of government which centers the rights, needs, wants, dreams, and aspirations of the people in its operation. The existence of democracy is directly proportional to the degree to which the people are integral to governance in all ramifications. And so we believe and that we signed on to the letter because of the apparent degrade of democratic practices in Nigeria, and the emerging, what I would like to describe as the emerging promise of the desire to engage more with the government by civil society, by citizens in the country. And so the recommendations that have been made in the letter and the recommendations we continue to make are for the government to enable a thriving civic space that allows free communication with the people in order to meet the goals of a democracy, if Nigeria is to be run as one. And this would include ensuring the independence of the judiciary, ensuring due process in budget execution, due process in the criminal justice system, ensuring that the engagement between civil society and the government is not impeded by restriction of access to social media, restriction of access to or restrictions of freedom of association in terms of protests and the like. All these are useful for a democracy to thrive. And we feel that looking back on the 22 years of the last spell or the latest spell of democracy in Nigeria and looking forward to the future, engagement of civil society, the protection of human rights, the respect of the rights of citizens to run their government through their representatives that have been elected would be essential for Nigeria to continue to make progress. And in that connection, the United States has a critical role to play, given the long-standing diplomatic and economic ties it has with Nigeria. And so we hope that the letter, the statement, the recommendations, and the engagement with the United States government and with the Nigerian authorities would continue to move Nigeria closer and closer to a true democracy that the people desire it to be. Thank you so much.
Ikechukwu, thank you so much. And thank you for your leadership and your eloquence in crafting the letter as well. I also want to acknowledge the valuable input of Professor Darren Q from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and Nathan Hostler and Church of the Brethren for their excellent leadership in helping to coordinate the Nigeria Working Group here in Washington, D.C. Samson Etodo, if your microphone is working, we're ready to hear from you. Samson, are you there?
Hi, Carl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, my network is flaky. And good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Apologies, I joined late. I'm having some technical issues. But my name is Samson Etodo, and I work for Ike Africa. And for us at Ike Africa, we support the statement. We sign on to the statement for 3 reasons. First, the statement and its purpose aligns with Ike Africa's commitment to the defense of democracy in Nigeria and in Africa. And we are concerned with the state of democracy in Nigeria regarding, first, the role that the state plays in clamping down on human rights or undermining democratic institutions, the absence or the disregard for the rule of law, and a failure of the state to perform its responsibility of providing the welfare and security of people. We are very concerned that the state has breached its own responsibility under the social contract that exists between citizens and the state. And this statement that we signed on to reinforces the need why the state needs to perform its own responsibility, and also calling on the US to continually hold the Nigerian government to account to its commitment to promoting democracy. The second critical point, and we strongly agree, that institutions like the judiciary and the National Human Rights Commission and the legislature, as agents of protection,
I think we lost Samson for a moment there. Let's wait.
Now ask him. He said, my mama said.
Rosalind, can you mute yourself for a moment? Okay, thank you. Samson, you cut off there. I hope you're able to put the final notes of your comments in the chat if you're having some connectivity issues. Last but not least, before I turn it over to NECA, let's hear from Nadine Farid Johnson from PEN America, and really excited to be working with PEN America. As many of you know, even the imagination has been under attack in Nigeria in recent years. And so the role of writers and novelists and people from the cultural sphere are really critically important, and very happy to have PEN America joining us. Nadine?
Thank you so much, Carl. And thank you to everyone who has spoken and who has joined on this letter. We do think it's critically important. A little bit about PEN America, I should say. I'm the Washington director here at PEN America, and I also have a very soft spot in my heart for Nigeria. I lived and worked there. My daughter spent the first years of her life there. The country and its people are truly, truly special, and it is critically important that they're able to exercise their democratic rights and freedoms. PEN America is a nonprofit that stands at the intersection of literature and human rights, and we protect free expression in the US and worldwide. We champion the freedom to write and to work, and we work to unite writers and their allies to celebrate creative expression and defend the liberties that make it possible. And as you know, those are liberties that are the basis of any democratic society. A major part of our work involves advocating for writers and intellectuals around the world who are facing serious repercussions, including imprisonment, harassment, and violence for their work. And we engage regularly on a range of countries and cases each year across the globe. We are, as PEN America, the largest of more than 100 centers around the world that make up the PEN International Network, including our sister center in Nigeria. We are, as I mentioned, a proud signatory to this important letter. As a free expression organization, we have been truly alarmed by the dangerous acceleration of Nigeria's treatment of this fundamental right, including by the closure of civic spaces, attacks against protesters, attacks against artists and journalists. We believe that the government must preserve the rights of protesters and the press, and must preserve the space for expression and communication online. One of my co-panelists here mentioned the Twitter suspension, and it is one example of an action that undermines democratic engagement. In barring news broadcasters from using Twitter to gather information, instructing them to delete their accounts, you can see how it's very quite clear what the impact is of such a ban on Nigerians' access to information. It is truly an outrageous assault on citizens' rights to receive information and to express themselves online. As noted in the letter, this is but one act in a long and growing line to suppress free expression, free association, and dissent. Legislative efforts have enabled the targeting of the media and others who are seen to be critical of the government. They have painted dissent under a broad brush of endangerment to national security, which allows them then to really target and suppress and oppress those who would express themselves. Also, we have seen that in peaceful protests that were calling for the disbanding of SARS, especially anti-robbery squad, we saw demonstrators killed. We saw dozens more protesters and journalists injured by police and by military forces. Nigerians have a right to address their grievances through free expression and through public demonstration. And journalists have a right to cover those protests without government reprisal, much less without state-sponsored violence. More than 2 decades after the end of military rule, Nigeria is truly risking losing the democratic gains it has achieved by virtue of these acts that are seen to suppress free expression. The government must recommit to defending fundamental rights and freedoms, which are essential to a strong and healthy democracy. Now, in the US, the Biden administration has pledged to make human rights a center point of its foreign policy. We saw that in the Democracy Summit, and the efforts by many different states to commit and to recommit to improving their support for human rights. We believe this letter is a critical step to action and to accountability over the next year as we look ahead to the Democracy Summit. And we look forward to working with all of you to do so.
Thank you so much, Nadine. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to NECA Achabu from AfriPac. And there already are 1 or 2 questions that have arisen in the chat. So NECA, why don't you take it away from here? We've got a little less than 30 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much, Carl, for having me moderate this session today. Good morning. My name is NECA Achabu. I am the founder of the African Public Affairs Committee, one of the organizations part of the Nigerian working group that is not based in Washington, D.C. The Houston area is inhabited with a lot of Nigerian Americans. And so these discussions are very important to me, the community I live, and of course, the various Nigerian Americans that are here in Houston and everywhere in the United States. And so I think it's very important to have these discussions and based on this letter. So we're going to encourage everyone who has questions to drop them in the chat so that I can read them off or call the individual who's posing the question. I am looking through the chat to see if
if people go down to the reactions at the bottom of the screen, there's also an option that pops up to raise your hand. That's another option. So you can put a question in the chat, and NECA, I'm happy to help you monitor the chat. Or participants can raise their hand. Rosalind, I know it sounded like you had some question. Rosalind Okoshun?
Not really, but I'm in support of what Reverend Ugalore just talked about. Thank you.
We're going to give it a couple more minutes for folks to go ahead and formulate their questions.
If any of the panelists in the meantime perhaps want to circle back to what one of their co-panelists said, this is also a good opportunity to do that. I was very pleased with the comprehensiveness of the letter.
I guess just to reflect generally on the future and how we continue to engage within Nigeria as civil society, and even broadly in terms of citizens, what I described as the emerging promise, which is actually that reborn desire of citizens, irrespective of the restrictions, irrespective of the over militarized response of the government to protests and the like, to engage with the government, to work around the Twitter ban, to engage with the government. What can we do as Nigerian organizations and as US-based organizations to support such movements? I think that one way to go around that would be to sustain this conversation. We must not wait for another summit for democracy. It has to be an ongoing conversation, sharing ideas, sharing strategies on how to continually engage, and even to show the government the value of such engagement in terms of keeping a pulse, or keeping their fingers on the pulse of the people who make up the democracy. So that's one thought that I have, looking ahead. I think it holds promise that people are willing to engage, and we have a responsibility to continue to foster such engagement and to strengthen citizens and civil society organizations that are doing that work. Thank you.
Can I just jump in on top of that with the Ikechukwu statement? Okay, I think I do agree with that proposition. I think that what we need to do is to keep on the momentum going ahead 2023 elections. So we don't have to wait when it is January of 2023 or when it is mid-2022. We need to keep up the momentum. People have said again and again that the answers are died. The vision, the ideology, the move, the enthusiasm of Nigerian youth are died with all of the things that happened. But we need to get back that and put it on top of an issue. We need to keep the momentum on. We need to keep organizing young people. We need to invest in that philosophy. We need to keep it alive. I mean, just maybe looking at an hashtag, keep hope alive, keep it alive, keep SARS alive. SARS gone beyond police brutality. SARS is about bad governance. SARS is about democratic authoritarian regime. SARS, SARS is what I'm talking about. And SARS is all about all of the things we see that you talk about Twitter ban, you talk about poor governance system. You know what is wrong with Nigeria right now? It's not even with democratic norms, that is high level of insecurity. The bandits are taking over the affairs of Nigerian state. Every nook and cranny of this state. Just yesterday, a woman was raped and killed by about 12 men. It is gone beyond just talking about democracy. It's gone beyond just talking about NSAS or talking about Twitter ban. That the lives we are losing in this state it requires some kind of global organizing. And the time is now. We must use this platform to pull up and get some investment that I don't know. I'm just going to put it on the table. Insecurity becomes more. If there is insecurity ahead of the 2023, and when we get there by 2023, there won't be an election. There won't be an election. People are going to travel. You can't travel from north to east, south to west, if you're not flying. If you have to go by road, everyone waiting for you will have to pray or do 24-hour fasting and prayer until you get back home. That is the scenario right now. The bandits have taken over. It is now worse than Boko Haram.
Thank you for that. I wanted to give the word to Charles Quellum, who will have a few words. Charles?
Yeah.
Where's yours?
Thanks, NECA. Just to keep the momentum on and going, I guess I'm just going to ask this open question. So we know that the president has 90 days to sign the amended electoral bill, and he's been very, very slow about it. What happens if he does not give accent to that bill? That is one. What is the Nigerian civil society gonna do? Any proactive steps and measures and strategies? That's one. Then secondly, my remark about changing the system is for us to harness this power that we have in the Nigerian society. We do know that the power that we have now in the Nigerian society actually dwells amongst the youth. So, you know, we have that youth power. I hate to use the term youth bulge. So that youth power is what we have. So why can't we mobilize ourselves to ensure that we use our electoral power to change the system? Because I do believe that irrespective of how irregular the electoral system is at the moment, even though there is no trust in that system at the moment, but however, if we come out en masse and move the country to a new direction with a new sense of purpose and governance, I think that there's going to be a drastic turn that is going to be positive and impactful.
Thank you, Charles, for that. If I may add, I think one of the things, I feel I'm still young. Is 35 still part of the young folks? One of the things that we lack here amongst Nigerian Americans, and I'm speaking from this side, is involvement and engagement. I feel like our communities, Nigerian American communities, are not well informed about what is going on in Nigeria, what is occurring, and people turn and look the other way. The reason why NSARS was very, very successful in terms of the campaign and the Twitter ban was because these are youth things. But not being able to find a job is a problem. Not being able to eat is a problem. Not being able to keep lights on is a problem. And so what is it this time that we're offering young people in an exchange for getting them galvanized to change the system. I think those are thoughts that we need to have and conversations that we really need to delve deep into, because yeah, we want to rely on the youths to lift Nigeria out, but how are we going about that? And that was a comment. Now, the next question is coming from Mr. Bankole. And the question is, how can we effectively explore democracy to drive people-oriented growth and development, basically? What exactly is needed to be done to translate the values and cores of democracy into real-life, practicable, and visible dividends for the governed? I think this speaks to what I was asking also. If anyone wants to take this question.
Yeah, I'd start. I think it's a useful question, and it's not one that can be sufficiently answered here because it goes to the root of the practice of democracy. First of all, is the recognition of the role of the people in democracy and the position of the people in democracy. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, as in other countries in the world, the people are seen as the recipients of the goodwill of the people in government, and as people at the receiving end of the democratic practice or the democratic, adventure, for want of a better expression. But that is not the case. The people should lead the democracy through their representatives, and so getting the government to realize that essential role that the people play, and the fact that the only way to serve the people in that construct is to keep lines of communication open and to grant people their rights to determine the agenda of the government. That's the only time that we can have a people-centered we have people-centered governance, we can have people-centered development and the like. For example, in terms of borrowing, the Nigerian government has been on a spree of borrowing in the last, as long as I can think, in the last 10 years, beyond this government, even though the previous government did better in terms of ensuring that, there are some savings and the like. Here, we have found borrowing that is not popular in the populace. The people do not support the wanton borrowing. There's no clear sense of what the borrowing is servicing in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, in terms of welfare, in terms of health. It's not clear. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, there's been repatriation of looted funds back into Nigeria, and people cannot trace what exactly they've been used to fund. This just breeds distrust, which continues to foster until a point where people now feel that they have no government, and so they have to fend for themselves. You have to acquire your own electricity, build your own roads, protect yourself. And, it's really that lack of a sense of a government that is there for the people. So when we change that dynamic to have the people above that pyramid and call the shots, and the government recognize who the people are, then we can begin the process of building towards a people-centered government. And, I know that would not happen by the snap of the finger, but that is why we need to keep engaging. That is why we need to keep supporting movements that insist on engaging with the government that way. That is why we need an electoral process that is egalitarian, that is transparent, that is open, so that the right people are in government and the right policies are being developed and implemented.
I'm always happy to speak after Ikechukwu. Well, that's a fantastic one. Even though if you ask governmental institution back home, that's why you guys are always borrowing. They will accuse the United States government that the US is the greatest borrower. So let me focus on the question. There have been a lot of theory about the people. Democracy is founded on the people. The definition is that it is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But that definition or that conceptualization has changed. The government of Nigeria isn't for the people, none came from the people. We know what our elections are doing, not just in Nigeria, across the West African region, and of course, Africa. We saw what happened in Mali, we saw what happened in Niger, we saw what happened in Guinea, and we're going to see what's going to happen in Senegal. There's been that using elections to justify people's acceptance of regimes and government. Elections are not able to play its role. And that is why the electoral regime, have a strong role to play in terms of who gets elected. And that is why we are very passionate about the proposals in the electoral bill 2021, one of which is the direct primary election process, which many of the godfathers of political parties are fighting against, the owners of political parties, those who dictate who should be candidates of parties. The selection process of Nigeria is the weakest link to our democratic consolidation. When parties select those big wings and those money bags, it impacts on the governance of the country. They don't care because they invested and they got what they want. They buy votes. They do all manner of things. They use state apparatus. They use state institutions against the ordinary citizens. So what do? Get back the power to the hands of the people. And the people in power, as often said, that the power of the people is greater than the power of those in power. I mean, the power of the people is greater than the people in power, if I'm right with that. That the people united it's not easily pulled down. So we need to begin a process by first getting the electoral bill signed and then strengthening trust, because right now there's trust deficit, that election no longer count. We just came back from an Anambra election. I spoke to people on the street in Anambra. They said they were not going to vote. And why? Because they fend for themselves. As Ikechukwu said, they run their own government. They provide their own electricity. They provided their own water. They provided everything for their own self. They protect their own self. So what's the essence of government? So there's no longer justification for elections. We must be able to see how, that is why the trajectory and the kind of thing we are doing now must be in the front line. We must push, and begin to put hope in the people that it can work better. That the philosophy that the people get the kind of government they want can actually be true to Nigeria. In Nigeria, you cannot say that we got a government we want when you can use guns and everything. We saw election in 2019 where the return officer returned a senator at gunpoint. You cannot say that's representing is representing the people. Let's call President Buhari to sign this regime. As Ugalore said, bring back the money, support the electoral regime let's clean up this process. And then once the people have trust in the regime, in the process, we can begin to answer the question that Bankole asked. Then we can begin to look at the core value of democracy. Then we can begin to practice that the people own those who are in authority. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to quickly intervene by saying that first, again, I want to thank you all. I think the intervention has been very powerful, and because we have a limited time, it will be very good for us to have a takeaway from this whole engagement. While we'll see this as an opportunity to share this first statement, like you know, the US Summit for Democracy is a 2 years process. Now the summit has come, the virtual summit has come and gone, and the last summit is coming next year. But within the year, there are going to be different initiatives and opportunity for engagement. And so what are the opportunities that is open to us? And I can think that we have seen several interventions from different organizations and different individuals. I think the key in moving forward is how do we translate collective action to concrete reality in Nigeria? Working in isolation will not really help Nigerian people. And how do we build collective action around some of the issues that we all have common understanding in? You will agree with me that there are quite a number of initiatives that is ongoing in Nigeria, but the only problem and challenge is that which the Nigerian government have taken advantage is the absence of collective action. For instance, it is easy to mobilize people, but the ability to be able to mobilize people to translate it to result is a very difficult challenge in Nigeria. And so where do we go from here? What are the opportunities that is open with the US summit? There are quite a number of initiatives that are open. For instance, in the anti-corruption sector, the US government have come up with a new anti-corruption strategy paper. In that paper, there are quite a number of opportunities for us to push forward. For instance, the banning of corrupt politicians. We can identify those politicians who are really the source of the problem. They are the driver of the values that are undermining democracy in Nigeria. We can identify their asset. They got an asset in the US. They got their children in good schools in the US, in UK, in different parts of the world. One thing that I know that the politicians are afraid of, the fact that they hear that they will be denied the access to visit America or to visit UK is a big threat to them. So what can we do as civil society under the anti-corruption and working closely with our friends that are working the democratic side of the angle? We can begin to build a mapping data of all the politically exposed leaders in the country who are promoting corruption, promoting values that do not support democracy. And we can work closely with the US government to identify these individuals, get hold of their asset. That can be a very powerful message that we can send within the electoral process. Then secondly, we also know that the US government has indicated interest in a number of initiatives on how to support democratic process in Nigeria. We as civil society should take this as an opportunity to engage. We should be proactive. We should not wait until the US government begin to bring out their plans. We should be able to engage and put our plans on the table, and so that we can own the whole entire process. And this engagement provides an entry point for that. And then to close it up, what can we do in the next 6 months? What can we do in the next 3 months? And I think, as I earlier on mentioned, it is better we work collectively than to work individually. The more we work in collective action, the more powerful message we can send. But unfortunately, the way that the donors and the foreign partners and foreign agencies work in Nigeria, they work in isolation. And that has really been very difficult to bring a civil society together, because civil society support that funds, for example, the anti-corruption work or the democracy work in Nigeria. They have different reporting system, and unfortunately, these guides how civil society works in Nigeria. Are there other ways we can begin to build forces around this so that we can engage? There are lessons to learn from it, and if we learn lessons from these efforts so far, then it can begin to provide an opportunity for us to engage the donor agency as well too. So that how we'll engage is very important, and how we take the resources that are available to do the engagement is also important. So in the next few years, what can we do? I think this is the real time that we can begin to have that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. And we are getting close to time. We have one last comment remark from Mary. Mary, I am going to unmute yourself. I'm going to mute you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I just want to echo our speakers, and I'm so sorry I just jumped on late, so that's why my video is not yet on, but I couldn't miss the opportunity. But exactly what they are saying, it's instead of actually us standing here and we advocate for the human rights advocates at Capitol Hill for the sanctions, let us actually request the US government to also push for any elected leader to respect term limits. There is a reason why term limits you've seen last year, it was able to revive our democracy when it was at stake. I mean, here in US. So therefore, even in Africa, there would be no reason why we should have constitutions which are invalid Why have a document which is not functioning? And every country on the continent has got a constitution which stipulates leaders should be either 5 years. I think Tanzania is among one of those, and actually Zambia, thank God, we are last month we had just a shout out to Zambia for respecting peaceful transfer of power. That way we will be able to contain the issues of coups. We will be able to have leaders, even if they mess up, let them go, and maybe that way we'll, along the road we'll have potential leaders. So issues of term limit respect, issues of constitutional adherence, those are the issues that we should really push on the continent rather than sanctioning. When you sanction, who suffers? I'm positive any leader is not going to suffer, neither is any of their children. It is the common man that suffers there, which increases poverty on the continent and again, continuous leadership failure. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Mary. I'm going to give the word back to Carl so that he can close. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And just very briefly, I want to encourage Mary to maybe follow some of the links with regard to the discussion of sanctions in the letter, because the sanctions are not blanket sanctions on countries. They are sanctions that freeze the assets of individuals. And this is something that I think has been innovated over the last decade or so, so that sanctions are very targeted and narrow and have a specific political end rather than hurting the people. I think we learned enough from that, from the sanctions on Iraq and elsewhere. Thank you so much for bringing us together. I want to thank CDD and Yaga Africa and Ike Chukwu at the RFK Center and Nadine Farid Johnson at PEN America and David Ugalore from ANEEJ for speaking today, and for everyone for collaborating on this important effort. This is going to be an ongoing campaign to defend and extend democracy in Nigeria and I will say in America. And I want to emphasize the nomenclature of the Democracy Summit as well, even though it didn't exactly come up. And that is to say, the Biden administration has been very careful to identify it as a summit for democracy and not a summit of democracies. And that is an explicit and purposeful acknowledgement of the idea that democracy is something that is not simply established, that it's a process and an ongoing effort that needs constant renewal with the energy and vitality of new generations and new ideas. And if we're going to live in respect of one another, and if we're going to live in dignity and free speech, and with improved developmental outcomes, then we need to defend this process that has the promise for lifting humanity. So thank you so much to all of my colleagues and friends in Nigeria, Washington, and beyond. And look forward to working with the Nigeria Working Group and the co-signatories on this letter. And we will make this recording available through the Nigeria